I don't think that I would be the person I am today without having Bear Creek Camp in my life, and I just find so many great connections with other people and relationships that are life-changing and long-lasting.
For me, I think the most meaningful part of camp was always how safe of a place it was for me to explore my identity. It was the first place that I started to come out as a part of the LGBTQI+ community, and it was just such a welcoming place for me to do that.
Working at Bear Creek Camp for the first time this summer was very fun and very crazy. And it was a little intimidating at first, but it was like I was not a new person. I was accepted immediately, and I was in the full swing of things with everybody there. It was just really incredible.
What a magical place. There is no doubt that as an international counsellor from New Zealand, I had the best time ever, and it just felt like a home away from home.
It shaped who I am as a person. It's given me the best friends I'll ever have who are going to be in my life forever. I'm alive because of that place. My parents met there. Camp is just the best place on the earth.
These are the voices of the counselors who have worked at Bear Creek Camp, a Lutheran summer camp outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. For many, these 3,000 acres of land is their favorite place in the world. However, this camp should not exist. It shouldn't be in these woods, nor was it ever meant to be in this location. The idea of all this not being here would be mortifying to those who cherish it, as a camp makes their world significantly better. So how did a camp like this, against all odds, survive unthinkable obstacles to bring joy and tranquility to this community? To begin our journey, we must head along the bank of the Delaware River in eastern Pennsylvania. Outside the town of Shawnee on the Delaware sat 3 camps ran by the North and Southeastern Pennsylvania Lutheran Synods. First, in 1927, the Boys' Camp Miller opened. Then came the Girls' Camp Hagen in 1937. And finally, Ministerium in 1954.
The Boys and Girls Camps, Miller and Hagen, were both skills camps. They were very traditional, learned to play with the bow and arrow, ride horses, camp, fish, all that stuff. Ministerium was put together as a training ground for Lutheran pastors, and that only morphed later into a camp for kids.
Strong leadership was always needed at the camps, and that definitely came when Pastor Roy Gulliford became executive director of all 3 camps in March of 1970.
The president of the Northeastern Pennsylvania Synod saw the opportunity for camp to be something different than it was. He had a bunch of renegade young pastors who were viewing ministry differently, helping people learn about themselves through personal interaction without being preachy. And so he picked Roy to be the head of this camp. Now Roy was a tough kid from Philly. Roy had no knowledge of the woods. Roy had no knowledge of being out of a city. And suddenly he was stuck with these camps, and he was tasked with trying to mold him.
He was everything. He was remarkable in all the hats that he wore to make all of this happen.
And it was his vision. It really was his vision. He knew where the camp had to go and was not going to back down.
And he never, ever wanted to give up being that part of the program. And that's why he always kept his heart and soul into that.
And he didn't like power figures, and so he was always in trouble with power figures. The Southeast Penn bishop despised him and would do everything he could to get in the way of the camp's activities, and constantly demanded more of the camps than they could possibly give. But we loved him for it because, people who are camp staff, they're 18 through 22, we're all rebels at that point, and none of us like a power structure, and so he was a hero.
With his new position, Roy radically changed how the programming at the camps operated.
Roy kind of turned the program on its head.
It was built on a small group, quest group thing. We had 7 girls and seven boys and 1 counselor, and that was a quest group.
And what he said to us was, you need to find where the kids are and listen to them. It was an exhausting program because at the end of the day we put the kids to bed and we spent 2 hours programming for the next day, and we did that every day, and the goal was to meet the kids where they were.
The way our day was like at Ministerium. We had a schedule that we would go hiking in the morning.
It was just very, very beautiful. And a lot of canoes and all those various things. It was the beautiful, big, huge barn, and we did all sorts of things.
We ate in the barn, we danced in the barn, we did arts and crafts in the barn, and if it rained, we were stuck in our cabins. Pretty much the quest groups did everything together, and then we would have nighttime join together and have maybe a scavenger hunt.
Staff meeting every day after dinner, where the entire staff would get together and we'd throw out the problems we were having with our group and get feedback from everybody else as to how to take the next step. This was not a passive group of people, and we brought very, very different skills to the table with all different backgrounds. Some really blue-collar people. There was racial diversity. It was an interesting bunch.
Despite new leadership, the river camp's physical conditions were worsening. However, an even larger threat was endangering their existence: the Tox Island Dam project on the Delaware River.
I think it was the 40s when the Tox Island Dam project was originally contemplated. There were always flooding problems downstream on the Delaware River. So there were plans to dam the upper Delaware for flood control. That went through any number of federal budgets and were funded, was not funded. By the 50s, it looked like it was going to be a go.
Yeah, the government was going to build a huge dam and the camps were going to be flooded.
There was still just this rumbling about what would happen with the river camps.
They started condemning the lands, and all the people had to move out all along the river road, which the three camps were on. And by 1973, there weren't any homes left. It was just the camps, and the camps had to close down then.
They decided they were going to take the land even though they weren't sure that the project was going forward. And they gave us a very short period of time to get out. Miller had already moved to Hagen because the uncertainty made it really difficult to do anything. So for financial reasons, they were functioning on both halves of the Hagen site. Ministerium stayed where it was.
1973 was going to be our final year, and that was the year that Paul and I were going to get married at the end of the summer, and we actually got married on the day before the bulldozers came in and took down the cabins.
They just dig a hole, push the cabin into a hole, cover it up. It was pretty scary.
Ministerium and Miller Hagen had to clear out now that the government had declared eminent domain on the property. Fortunately, new land for the camps had been scouted in the woodlands near the village of Bear Creek.
The land was bought years before.
In 1964, the ELCA started accumulating parcels of land in Bear Creek so that at some point we'd have the opportunity to move somewhere else if we had to. And it was an interesting process because if it became apparent that the same person was acquiring parcel after parcel, the price would go up.
We had shadow buyers who bought up lots of parcels of land, basically because they didn't want to let anybody know that all this land was going to become a nonprofit camp and take it off the tax books. And so when it was time to make Bear Creek Camp, they combined all the 3,800 acres into one property, and then it was Bear Creek Camp.
But what exactly was this land? What was once here where a camp was soon to form? From hunting lodges to mills, the remains of abandoned structures on the property exhibited history.
The Lewis family owned almost all that land in that area, and they put the dams in at Bear Creek and then two further up the creek on the land that Bear Creek Camp owns.
One of the dams is right off Election, what we call Old Shale Pit, and then the other dam is down across from the ice house, what we call the Landing or the Lookout.
They timber the logs, they'd get them down to the stream, get them down to the deep water. They had a conveyor system to load them up to the rails, and they'd send them down into the city. There was a rail line that went on the far side of the creek from the camps. That trail that goes between the waterfalls was a rail line.
And they logged the land basically completely bare, and when they ran out of trees, they looked at the creek and said, well, we can ice harvest. So the ice harvesting was happening right at the turn of the century. And then when refrigerators were invented, when the metal from the railroads needed to be used for the World Wars, they stopped that as well. And then the land was just left to be basically stripped bare. And because they removed all the trees, all the topsoil washed away as well, which is why all of our land is super rocky. Now here, 50 years later, the land has forest again, and we're ready to continue to use it this way.
Before Bear Creek was to be settled, Roy had anticipated a reimbursement from the federal government for claiming eminent domain on the river camps. By this point, the dam project had been delayed and the river land rented back to the camps. Yet this was costly, and resources were needed to launch the camp's next project.
There was a plan for the development of Bear Creek that presumed the value of the land $7 million. And that $7 million was supposed to be used to put Miller and Hagen back up on the site, Ministerium on the site, an area that was planned for senior RV camping. There was a small airstrip planned at one point. The law firm that was representing the camps at the time kept convincing Roy that the number was going to be very big and that we should take it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which we did.
Desperate and feeling optimistic, the trek for their money rose all the way to the Supreme Court. The court voted against the camp 8-0 in 1979. The original settlement of only $700,000 would be given, a mere tenth of what they hoped for. The dream project would be impossible. Yet back in 1974, Ministerium had begun their move to Bear Creek.
At that point, there was nothing at Bear Creek. They took as much as they could from Ministerium to help build Bear Creek, like
the barn, and they took it off. Our guys, we took the lumber, and we took a lot of that went in there.
Most of the heavy beams in the retreat center were from the barn at Ministerium.
They brought the toilets from the cabins because they were China. I think they may have brought some of the sinks too.
The camp was supposed to have been ready in March. In June, it still wasn't ready, so we were operating just on a shoestring. It was crazy. Ministerium was in exile. Now, we'd already lost the Ministerium facility, so we moved to Miller Hagen and had a small part of Miller Hagen where we were trying to operate Ministerium until the camp was ready at Bear Creek. And we literally moved the entire camp in one weekend. We closed down and moved the entire camp from Miller Hagen and then set up shop and got going. When we got to Bear Creek, junior high site was there, the senior high site was there, but they were on 10 platforms. There were 10 platforms, so there were big tents. 4 of the cabins were just foundations, and the only water we had was the upper dam breast. So we cut a trail down to the water, and that's where we swam. We bought this huge army tent and put it in the A field, and that was arts and crafts. That was where registration occurred. It was crazy. I mean, it was rustic beyond belief. But the fact that parents trusted us with their kids is pretty astounding.
Against all odds, the first summer at Bear Creek Camp was a success. Campers enjoyed their stay, and Roy's programming could endure. But first, Miller Hagen needed to merge.
In 1975, we went back to Miller Hagen, and Paul became the director of Miller Hagen for that summer, and Blake was at Bear Creek. We lived in the trailer at Bear Creek on the weekends and in the winter. And then at the end of 1976, Paul was the naturalist at Bear Creek, and we had Amy, our first baby. And at the end of 1976 is when Miller Hagen closed, and we moved up to Bear Creek. And Paul's job was supposed to be the naturalist, but that meant doing maintenance, that meant doing building, that meant doing everything.
With the camps along the river having completed their move, further additions were made to the site, while Roy and the staff navigated chronic financial instability. This was bittersweet, considering that the Tox Island Dam Committee voted against constructing a reservoir. No dam was ever built. All this turmoil was for nothing. Regardless, there was much work to be done. A man-made lake was dug and filled for campers to swim in. A suspension bridge connected the two halves of the camp together, and a massive pavilion was erected on the upper A field. And throughout all these changes, the staff who worked here continued to love the people, the place, and the community. Without Pastor Gulliford, none of this would have existed. Roy retired in 1995 and passed away in 2015.
If there's anything that's unique about Bear Creek, it's that part of what Roy brought to camp has never gone away. Roy taught us The old church was preaching. The old church was telling people what to do. The new church was learning how to listen to people and trying to catch them where they are and then do it with a sense of love. But we don't have to know one another to know that we've got this in common. And you feel camp, it doesn't wane, it doesn't go away.
Our alumni network is great, and they're very passionate. They will come together in support of this place and of this community whenever we need them to, which is fantastic.
Well, they're our family, I guess is what I would say. It's sort of remarkable that we've been together over 50 years and we're still call them our best friends, right?
Most of my closest friends, a legacy with a son and daughter-in-law and grandsons who just love the place.
You know, when we go down the road from Bear Creek, I think we breathe differently, we feel differently.
It's the tone. When you walk into that place and you know that you're going to be greeted with a hug and you know it's a safe place to be and you know it's a place that people can learn a lot about themselves in a very short period of time because everybody there cares about them. That's the essence of camp, and it's the essence of it, I think, that's important.
Camp is so important, and I can't say it any other way than I truly, genuinely believe that what people need is more camp. Camp provides community spaces, camp provides nature, camp provides opportunities to do new things that you can't do anywhere else. And if just everybody got a camp experience and then took those lessons and went back out in the real world and applied even like 5% of it, we would change the world. Like, everything would be better in the world if everyone got to come to camp. And so that's why we have to keep being here and evolving with the times, because it's really important that what we were doing in the 40s back with the river camps, what we were doing in the 70s at the early days of Bear Creek Camp, that can't be what we're doing in 2021 and beyond. It has to be different because the whole world is different. But still hanging on to those key parts of who we are and who we have been since the beginning, making sure that we stay true to those mission values, that's gonna be really important for us as an organization and our community to hang together.